Her scaly face was paler than ever when Dew saw her during her breakfast. Usually Alba's round face had a rosy undertone, and her spirit was calm and a little excited. That morning he could clearly see the dark rings under her barely open eyes. She must have missed out on more sleep than he had. Dew didn't look closely at the king like he always did, but the man seemed bothered, being bent over more than usual and fingers restlessly tapping the table surface. The only person who had a somewhat normal behavior was the advisor. He hadn't been in the courtroom. Dew asked himself how much he knew of the situation. He hoped it to be nothing, so that ugly smile he wore would be buried together with the kingdom he ruled. But the servant felt sorry for the princess. She was supposed to inherit the entirety of the land and turn it for the better. The goddess had already shown her failure of taking initiative, ironic for an immortal and powerful being who fully relied on a 16-year-old who had no experience in ruling, but a single court session which had gone terribly wrong. Later in the warm room with the couches, she expressed she felt the same way, even though that would have been an understatement. He found her with reddish eyes, bent over with several piles of papers before her. Next to her stood Avery, unable to decide whether to try and comfort her or continue her duty of securing the princess's physical well-being, which meant being frozen on spot. When he came in, she invited him to sit across from her, as usual, while she tried to get her face together. "You have heard the news already, yes?" Alba asked him a while after he had seated himself cross-legged, with his fingers intertwined and unsure where to direct his gaze at. And it ended up being the colorful carpets on the wall, one where a white bird built like a peacock found a ginormous snake leviathan in the middle of a raging ocean. To her question he replied, "Is it all that bad?" "Well," she rearranged the papers before her and put a map on display, where she encircled the entire west part with her finger. "Those are 5 bigger areas with villages around them which we have most likely to face in battle. The plan is to arrive before the enemy troops can assemble so we can secure the situation before anything gets out of hand." "But," Dew threw in, "but look at this." Alba began to mark 10 spots outside the big circle with smaller ones. "Those are all the places we could possibly get many soldiers from. Around 4 of them are unreliable and might turn against us if they don't stay neutral. Then there's the problem with the distance. Messengers have already been sent to the closest place and will continue outwards from that point on, but the moment all have been contacted, a small group will already have to face the enemies, and they might have already planned there to be a confrontation, which will make them much quicker. Haven said they will be our guard in war against other kingdoms, but not against ourselves. This can go horrifically wrong." Her fist came crashing down on the paper as she ended, and the tool broke under the pressure. Dew sucked in his lips while staring down at the mess, which was represented Bota as a kingdom. Then he gazed at the knight still standing around motionlessly, and at Alba, who had drawn her legs to her body while rocking forth and back. "But it's possible," Dew attempted to cheer her up. "It is," Avery's dark voice sounded from behind, "but only by the time the others arrive. Until then it will be around 4 of them against 2 to 3 of ours, maybe more even." "And several of ours have been injured through last night already," Alba cried out helplessly, before pointing at the guard and exclaimed, "Ivy already took a bullet. At least that's what they said about her, because she walks just fine." The hybrid suppressed a frown. "Thinking about it, don't you want to sit down?" Dew suggested and patted on the space next to him, but then he quickly remembered he was the guest in the chamber. Luckily Alba agreed. "Oh, right, you will need to be well rested for the battle assembly in 4 days. 4 days? He heard himself gasp loudly before being able to control himself. Avery smirked at him in pain only he could see. Loosening the claymore from her belt and placing it between her knees, she joined him on the couch. "I thought it would at least take a week," Dew explained himself, his hand searching Avery's, but all he got to grasp was the cold metal of her gauntlet. She slipped her other hand out and placed it on top of his to calmingly stroke it. "We would have sent everyone the same night if it would have been possible, but we need at least 2 allies to at least build up defenses. We're so little and the depth is a problem," the princess continued elucidating. She had gotten herself out of her curled-up position, but held a big pillow in her arms instead, as if it could protect her from any danger. Dew did the same, but more subtle, with someone's hand instead of a pillow. Is there no way she can just stay here? Like, as a guard of the royal unit, Dew pleaded. She was the princess, shouldn't she be capable of something as small as this? And it wasn't as if the army depended on the single person, but he did. He depended more on this person than anyone else that ever existed. I asked, Alba murmured melancholically. It could easily lead to greater agitation than there already is, Sir Puff said so. We believe barely anyone wants to fight for honor or anything as romanticized as this anymore. The soldiers prefer to have a life guarantee. She's your personal guard. I am a tool to reassure safety in the first place. The place where I am needed the most is not in the protection of the walls, but on the battlefield, Avery replied calmly, as if she hadn't been laughing herself into badness just the night before. What if she's too injured to fight? The moment the words left his lip, he became aware of the implications. She patted his hand and chuckled softly. I want to see you stab me hard enough to enable me to fight. You'd have to at least get rid of one of my legs for sure. Go for it. I don't insist on dying miserably between a bunch of rotting corpses of my comrades or be raped until I can't stand anymore. You just have to be aware that both of us would be exceedingly vulnerable. His fist hit her shoulder with a lot less force than he had intended to. She barely even moved. It left him frustrated. To reach back again, yet she quickly caught his full arm before he could even touch her. In one swift movement, Avery twisted his arm behind his back and loosely held him down that way. I suggest we stay with my idea. I go and do my duty, and you leave as soon as you can in the opposite direction. She spoke down at him. Meanwhile, he struggled himself free after the initial shock wore off and spat, No shot. If you don't return, I will kill his ass. His eyes flew to the side at Alba, who had fallen over to the side and was watching the chaotic scene with sad interest. When the knight tried to get her hands back on Dew's wrist, he fought back with slight aggression. Dew, just stay out of as much trouble as you can. Don't act like a headless chicken, she exclaimed while seizing him rougher than before. Dew felt his temperature rising higher. His foot rammed itself into the ground while he pushed himself away to get out of her grasp. She didn't let go, so he spat, If he kills you and dares to show up, he's dead as well. Even if he doesn't, he has to die, and I'll gladly do it. With those words he tore himself free, but his heated skin began feeling eerily empty, as if the place where Avery's hand had just been replaced by a slab of ice. Who are you talking about? A quiet voice sounded from across them, which neither of the two reacted upon. Of course, fight the man which is stronger than me at this point. Good luck! Avery's shout pierced through Dew's bones, as if he had been slammed into a wall. You will end up raped or killed, and I don't know which one is worse. Think, airhead. Is this worth it? Does the word realism have a spot in that clouded brain of yours? He felt himself frozen on the spot. Having moved to the other end of the couch with his upper body leaned away from her and arms and legs positioned as if he would run away at any second, he stared at her greyish-pink irises and the white of her eyes which had taken an obvious red undertone. The rest of her face was a void absent of human emotion. Her clenched fists were stabbing into the bouncy surface next to Dew's foot on the couch. She had leaned forward to him, but instead of attempting to restrain him, his partner did nothing but shatter him on the inside. What would you do if you knew I would die? Dew forced out, barely a single sound being more than a breath. Her lips twisted into a smile while she closed her eyes. We had that before, didn't we? She chuckled. And it was close. He almost became just another corpse dangling in the busy air of a city center. And you know how I would have reacted if you would have died there. You know how I did react shortly afterwards when I misinterpreted a single gesture as rejection. Maybe I would have sought revenge, but I would have ended myself no matter the cost. Now tell me, would you do the same? Would you kill yourself or would you live on after a while? Because I think you are capable of living on. I'm not. I'm already dead enough. I am not, Dew replied without hesitation, surprising both her and himself as well. He tried swallowing the feeling in his throat before repeating, "I would kill myself. What kind of life is it supposed to be where a lowly creature like the one I am can't even eat properly without throwing up every third meal? If that's not enough to take me down, it will either be him to drive me into madness or the people will come after me and my flesh. Now does that sound like anything worth living for?" An expression of pain entered her face, having her age changed from 19 to several decades just in a second. Slowly but surely she crawled further toward him until she was easy in reach to gently put an arm around his back and push him towards her. His head sank into the blue fabric of her new clean uniform. Her other arm wrapped around him as if he was a fragile and expensive vase which would shatter at any moment. It took him a moment to process, but as soon as he did, the tears flooded him like a dam succumbing to cracks which had expanded over the course of years of constant pressure. "Who is that man you are talking about?" Duke could barely make out Alba's voice through the pounding in his head. Avery replied calmly, "It doesn't concern the crown or the war. It is a personal dispute." "But I want to know what the people I see almost every day have on their mind," she insisted defiantly, but there was honest concern in her tiny voice. "I assure you, you won't have to need to know, my princess. And you will not see those two people for much longer, I fear." He wanted to curl up in her arms and vanish, but he couldn't. It wasn't the right place to do so. Her gauntlet laid heavy on his back, her spine was twisted to comfort him but keep her feet off the expensive couch. It appeared silly, even ridiculous, to him how he was silently crying into a knight's uniform again. He forced himself to straighten up and dry his face with the end of his sleeve. That was immature, I apologize," Dew uttered, feeling how his face continued to twitch and his eyes continued to pour. The door was nearby, so he attempted to stand up and walk out. If he wasn't an entertainment, but began putting the princess down, what was he here for? But as soon as he stood on his own two legs, the balance left his body. Dew collapsed into Avery's arms, who then continued to hold him so he would not slip and fall onto the dusty floor. "May you excuse us? I will be back in 10 minutes, Avery addressed Alba, but she replied, "I understand why he said, I don't mind if he cries. He can stay." This is mainly for his own comfort. Then the princess understood. His arm encircled her waist while his head laid on her belly. She bravely ignored the pain the pressure on her newest wound caused her. Dew hadn't managed to stop his weeping, no matter how hard he scolded and despised himself for doing so. Avery stayed wordless. All she did was half sit, half lay there and caress his head, arms and shoulders. At some point she began humming a slow and soothing melody which made Dew's chest tighten while choking sobs gradually raged through him. It had definitely been more than 10 minutes, but Alba had offered them to take as much time as they needed. As he needed. He was the problem. She showed no concern towards anyone but him, not even herself. Especially not herself. Of course not herself. She wished herself to be dead as much as or even more than he did at that very moment, and she had made it clear that there was no other reason but him she had kept herself as alive as a corpse could be throughout the past 3/4 of the year. The roles hadn't turned around but had duplicated. Now he hung by a thread as well, and he wasn't the one who would have to go to war in less than a week and die. Yet she was there, on the bed, comforting a pathetic freak. "How about this?" she then said. "I will leave, and I will return." "Ha," he pressed through his lips. "I mean it," Avery insisted and cupped the back of his head in between her hands. "You said there was no way." "But what if I try, Avery hummed. She had his head turned upwards so Dew could see her sincere, dreamy expression. "But you will die." "Even then I will return." Dew's face sank back into her clothes while he said hopelessly, "How do you do that?" "I will find a way," she insisted and pulled him to the height of her collar while getting herself further into a laying position. "Maybe I'll be a ghost. Then there would be 2 of those haunting their loved ones." "Who's the other one?" Ophelia, of course. She's always with Sue or the princess or her first lover Betty, a servant in the army around Sue's age. And she's also around me sometimes. If I would die, I'd come for you as a ghost until you'd join me. Or I could ascend to godhood just for fun, you know. Wouldn't it be funny if you were suddenly married to a god? He moved his hands under her shoulder blades. And what then? Dew sniffed. I don't know, we'll find something, she replied so ridiculously nonchalantly that it made him huff out a laugh. We will.